morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'm Katie, and this is What Happened. Tonight we're doing a Bible story, and it is full of brotherly betrayal, treachery, deceit, and parental flaws. It also covers accountability and forgiveness. So sit back and relax, and let me talk about the story of Jacob and Esau, or maybe I should say it in reverse. Let's start with section 1. I'm going to call it the parents. Esau and Jacob were twins. Their parents were Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac was the son of Abraham. As we get into the story, maybe he had some things that he was carrying over from his childhood. For example, his father almost sacrificed him. Ooh. So yeah, it was crazy, but Isaac was 40 years old when he had a pact to be married, and they brought Rebekah to him, and they had this whole love story thing where their eyes met across the field. She was riding a camel, and when he saw her, they locked eyes, honey. He took her to his mama's tent, and he said, "Let's get on." Yeah, I did it. That's what happened, right? And so from that point on, they were married. Now, let's jump ahead in the story because this story is not so much about Isaac and Rebekah, even though they are key players. Rebekah was barren, or it could have been Isaac. We don't know. So around the time Isaac was 60 years old, he had been praying to the Lord, "Hey, please bless my wife. Let us be fruitful." And it happened. Rebekah conceived, but she thought that something was wrong with the pregnancy. So much so that she asked the Lord, if everything is normal, why does it seem like my child is struggling within me? And the Lord answered her. He said that 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. One person will be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. That's very much against the grain, right? Usually the older has the birthright and everything passed down to them. The pregnancy progressed, and when she became full term, she had the twins. The first baby was red and hairy, so they called him Esau. And I'm going to put these names on the screen in case I don't pronounce them right, because sometimes I don't. But it literally means hairy. His brother Jacob came out right behind him, and he was holding Esau's heel like he was trying to keep up, right? And so they named him Jacob, which means supplanter, which is when you take somebody's place from strategy or force. So we've got 2 very meaningful names here. So let's jump ahead. The boys grew up and they got older, and there was some competition there. But Isaac decided to ignore it in a way. I think it had to have been pointed out. Esau was a skillful hunter. He liked to be in the outdoors. He also cooked, where Jacob was more inside. He was softer is how it probably would have been thought of back then. He stayed in the tents, basically. He was like, I ain't gonna be out in the sun. I'll be in the house. And that's where he was. So the competition grew, and Isaac continued to ignore it while Rebekah, the mother, sided with Jacob. So let's pause here and go into section 2. I'm gonna call part 2 the Trickster. As this competition continued to grow and actually get out of hand, it should have been checked, but Jacob decided that he wanted what was his brother's, because his brother would have what's called the birthright. He would get the inheritance. He would get a special blessing. And Jacob decided that even though he wasn't the oldest, he needed this. His first plan was to simply trick his brother. He knew that Esau liked to go out hunting, and sometimes he would be out for long periods. He just waited and bid his time. What happened is Esau went out, and he was out for an extremely long period of time this go round, and he was hunting, but he wasn't successful in his hunt. The longer he didn't catch any game, the longer he stayed out. Well, he stayed out so long that he literally became famished, to the point that Esau felt like he could die if he didn't eat right then. So as he staggered back to the camp, exhausted, but more than anything else hungry, Jacob decided this would be his opportunity. When Esau got back, he said, "Please give me some food, brother," pretty much. Like, feed me, I am famished, I might die. And Jacob said, "Yeah, I'll feed you if you agree to give me your birthright. I could get you some food. I mean, do you want to give up all that you could inherit?" Esau was so hungry. He said, "Look, I am about to die. What good is the birthright going to do me?" So Jacob cooked the stew and he fed Esau. And Jacob was very happy because in his mind, he had won. I got Esau to give me his birthright. Let's move it forward a little bit. This story kind of bounces back and forth between the twins and the parents, Isaac and Rebekah. I talked about how Isaac saw the rivalry between his sons but did nothing. And I talked about how maybe that has something to do with his father being willing to sacrifice him. Now, we'll go to that story another time, but I don't care what anybody says. Sacrificing of your kids is bad, okay? Bad, bad, bad. Maybe he has some trauma behind that. So he just really chose to bury his head in the sand. As time went on, there was a famine in the land. And Isaac was like, okay, I should move. He was going to go to Egypt, but the Lord told him, no, don't go to Egypt. Go to Gerar. And he went there, and Rebekah was beautiful, right? So men started to notice her and they started to ask Isaac, is that your wife? And Isaac said, no, that's my sister. He said that because he didn't want conflict with any of the men. It really left them vulnerable because the men could have still pursued Rebecca. That could have been nice or forcefully. We don't know. I mean, it could happen anyway. If some men in that time thought that was his wife, they wouldn't go after her. But he was so conflict avoidant that he was like, no, this is my sister, because she was too fine to defend. As time went by, Isaac started to do pretty well on the land. He was doing decent. But there was a king, Abimelech. Abimelech was coming through one day and he happened to see Isaac and Rebecca through the window. They were like being affectionate. I don't know if they were kissing or hugging, but to Abimelech, the king, it was something clearly that a brother and a sister would not do. And he was truly mad. So he went and confronted Isaac expeditiously, baby. He was like, why did you say that this was your sister? Clearly, this is your wife. Isaac said, you know, she's beautiful. I didn't want no trouble. Like, I can't fight over her because I might not win. Abimelech was like, what have you done to us? Any man could have lain with her because you lied. And he was so mad at Isaac that he made it known, hey, this is this man's wife, and whoever lays with her, you're going to be put to death. How about that? Or if you touch him, as a matter of fact. Isaac was so scared of conflict that the king had to step in and say, this is his wife. Don't touch her. Don't touch him. More time passed, quite a bit of time, because during this time, Isaac got really prosperous. He had so many animals. He had wells that ran fresh water. The people of Gerar would get mad and they would put dirt in his wells and he would move because he wasn't going to fight them about it. He would just keep moving until finally the Lord gave him a well that could be his and he didn't have to compete for it. During this time, just so we know where the twins are 40 years old, and Esau, he took Judith as a wife. She was the daughter of a Hittite, and he took Basemath as a wife, who was another daughter of a Hittite. This is important because this grieved his parents. Like, they did not like the choices that he made in a wife, and it most likely just had to do with their backgrounds. This was a problem for Isaac and for Rebecca. Even though Esau was Isaac's favorite because he liked his food and his game and meat that he hunted in his stews, Jacob was Rebecca's favorite. So surely she really pushed this bandwagon. Like, look at his wives. He married 2 Hittite women. This is going to lead us into part 3. I'm going to call part 3, The Family Ain't Ish. Let's fast forward. Isaac is old now, and as he gets older, his eyesight is really bad. He's pretty much blind. When his vision was at its worst and he didn't know how long he had left to live, he called for Esau, his oldest son. He said, hey, my son, I don't know what day I'll die. I don't know how long I'll live, but would you take your bow and arrow and go hunt me some game and make me some of your savory stew? Because that's real ish. Like, if it's my last day, let me give me a real good last meal, right? He wasn't gonna waste time. He needed that good food. So Esau, of course, obliged his father, like, yeah, Dad, I'm gonna go do that for you. And he didn't waste time. He immediately went out to go hunt so that he could cook this stew for his father. In the meantime, Rebecca is eavesdropping, honey, and she hears her husband Isaac saying, ooh, I might not have long to live. So she goes to get her favorite son, Jacob, and she says, look, we gotta move quickly and we gotta move now, because you may have tricked Esau into giving up his birthright. However, if you don't get that blessing, it don't mean nothing. Rebecca said, son, you need to listen to me. I want you to go over to the flock, get me 2 goats, make sure it's a baby goat because we need that fresh meat, and I'm gonna make a savory stew for your father, and you're gonna go and serve it to him and pretend to be your twin brother Esau. That way you can trick him and get your blessing. Immediately, Jacob saw a problem with this. He was like, Mom, my brother Esau is hairy. Like, he is really hairy, and I'm smooth everywhere. We are complete opposites in this department. I can never fool my father. What if he asks to touch me? He's gonna know immediately that I'm pretending to be my brother. Rebecca said, son, I got that covered. But Jacob wasn't done, because even though he had tricked his brother before, it's like he had a piece of a conscience, right? Because he says, well, mother, if my father realized I'm tricking him, I could bring a curse down on myself. So maybe it wasn't a conscience. Maybe it was more of him being self-serving, now that I really think about it. His mother said, well, just tell yourself that you're obeying me, and then if he brings a curse down on you, it'll really be on me. So still, no skin off your nose, you're fine. Rebecca hurried up, went over to Esau's tent, got some specific clothes that are like his favorites that he wore a lot, and she put them on Jacob. Then she put the skins of the kids, which is the baby goats, she put the skin of it on his hands, so that covered up Jacob's smooth hands. She went further and put some around his neck, because what if Isaac hugged him and felt that his neck was smooth? So she really went all out for this treachery, honey. Jacob was dressed and ready. He's got on Esau's clothes, he's got on goat skins, and he's ready to go fool his father. So he goes to his father's tent. Remember, he can't see, and he says, Father, here I am. Now you can say what you want to say about Isaac, but he immediately knew, who are you? He's like, who are you? Because you don't sound like Esau to me. You sound like Jacob. And he was like, no, father, I'm Esau. Well, if you Esau, why do you sound like Jacob? Maybe he knew his twins apart. He should have intervened in things coming up in their childhood, but it didn't make him the worst father on the planet. Like, he did know his kids. He had been with them their entire lives. But Jacob went on to convince him. He said, look, I did what you told me to do. I went and hunted some game and I made stew. And Jacob even said, well, that was quick, because normally it takes you longer to hunt. He was like, yeah, basically, here it is. It's a lucky day or something. He wasn't worried about it. He has questioned the voice. He has questioned how quick he was able to hunt. He is now questioning, like, come here, let me feel you, because my oldest son is hairy and I know for sure. So Jacob extended his hand out and Isaac rubbed his hand. And even then he wasn't done. He was like, you sound like Jacob. You came back too quick from the hunt, but you feel like Esau. And let's be real, they were twins, so there were probably some similarities to their voices, just like there were differences. But one more time before he issued that blessing, Isaac said, are you sure that you're my son Esau? Jacob said, yes, father, I am. And he said, well, come near me and kiss me and let's do this blessing. But even then, Isaac was smart. He was not just kissing Jacob to kiss him. He knew how his sons smelled. It was said that Esau smelled more like the land. He would be outside a lot. He would be hunting. It didn't mean he smelled bad, but if you ever went outside and stayed outside for an hour, you just smell like outdoors. Whereas Jacob was in the tents, he smelled different, but he had Esau's clothes on, so he smelled like Esau. He gave him this blessing, and basically it was a blessing so that the earth would be fruitful for him, the people would serve him, his mother's sons would bow down to him, the other sons, in this case the brother he's stealing from, and anybody who cursed you, let them be cursed. Jacob took that blessing and he ran with it. This was the timing of it all. Jacob had no sooner left the tent to go brag to his mother like, ooh, I got the blessing. Here comes Esau. Esau came back, he cleaned the game and cooked it, and he went immediately to his father's tent. And he said, Father, arise, I have bought the food that you asked for, basically. Like, get up out your bed, I bought you your food, come and eat. Isaac said, wait a minute, who are you? And he said, I'm your son, your firstborn son, Esau. Now, Isaac started shaking, baby, because the voice was right. The timing was right for how long it took him to hunt and get the game. He probably knew deep down that he had been tricked. Isaac said, oh my gosh, who did I give your blessing to? Oh my gosh, I gave your blessing to him. It had to be Jacob. And the first thing that happened to Esau is that it's probably like an air of desperation, He was like, Father, bless me, like bless me. His dad said, I can't give you the same blessing because this was just how it was done. You gave the blessing to one son. You did not give that blessing to anybody else. So Esau was like, you can't do anything. That's the wrong son. It was supposed to be my inheritance, my birthright. You can't do anything. Isaac thought about it and he said, this is all I can do for you, son, because I gave the blessing out. Whether it was meant to go to Jacob or not is done. So he gave him this blessing, wishing that he would live on good earth, fertile earth, so that he could prosper, that the extra and excess from heaven rained down on him. And this is the part that really got Esau worked up. He told Esau, by your sword you shall live and you shall serve your brother. There will come a time where you will grow restless, and at that time you shall break away from your brother. Can you imagine your brother stole your birthright and now your blessing is including how you're going to serve him? Because of this, Esau hated Jacob. Hated wasn't a good enough word. Esau actually said, I have to mourn for my father, but when that's past, I'm going to kill you, Jacob. You hear me? You hear me, Mama Rebecca? I'm gonna kill your favorite son. Rebecca knew that he was serious. She decided, oh, let me get to Jacob. Jacob, you need to go away. You need to go to Haran and stay with my brother Laban. And this leads us into section 4. I'm going to call section 4 Karma. Now it was time for Jacob to go to his uncle Laban. That was his mother's brother. His father gave him another blessing before he left. Basically, that blessing was to be fruitful and multiply, to have plenty of children, probably sons was thrown in there. Isaac also told him, do not take a wife from Canaan. Take a wife from your uncle's tribe. Esau heard this and he even tried to gain some favor with his parents after he lost his blessing. So he took a third wife, I believe it was his third. He went to a tribe that he knew would be approved, and that's where he got that wife from. Now let's get on to this journey because this is where it gets real ratchet. Jacob traveled and he had a long road to go. And at some point, he stopped and laid his head on a rock. And he had this dream about climbing the ladder. And that's where you get the phrase Jacob's ladder. But in this ladder, he saw angels ascending and descending the ladder, going up and down. He thought that overall that this dream was a sign that this place was a holy place. And so he marked it with that stone. Now, he kept on traveling and finally he got to a well. He saw people there. And one of the first people he saw was Rachel. And she was beautiful and he instantly fell for her. And so he asked the people, who does this well belong to? Does anybody know Laban? And they said, yes, these are his lands. He saw Rachel. He kissed Rachel and told her, tell your father I'm his sister's son. Before he left, Isaac and Rebecca, his parents, made it clear, yeah, just go marry one of your first cousins. Yeah, crickets, because that's what we did back then. He instantly was like, oh, Rachel is beautiful. Now, Laban came to greet him warmly. He hugged him. He kissed him. And Laban had two sons, Leah and Rachel. Leah was the oldest. Now, this is how the Bible describes Leah. They said that Leah had delicate eyes, so pretty eyes. Where I'm from, that's like a backwards compliment. When people can't think of anything else to compliment you on, they'll be like, oh, those some cute shoes, or yeah, your eyes are pretty. So basically, they were trying to say that Leah was maybe a little bit ugly or maybe not as pleasing to the eye, because they then go on to say that although his oldest daughter Leah had pretty eyes, that Rachel was pretty in appearance and form. So you see what I'm saying? Why they calling that lady ugly? Either way, Jacob had made up his mind. He wanted Rachel. So he was greeted warmly and Laban let him stay with him, and he was working for Laban, working the land because he just wanted to be close to Rachel, you know. This went on for about a month. And so finally, Laban said, surely you aren't working for free. What do you want? Name your wages. So if we don't know anything about Jacob, we know he'll go after what he wants, whether it be right or wrong. He said, I want your daughter Rachel. And Laban agreed. He said, if you work for me for 7 years, then I will give you my daughter's hand in marriage. Jacob didn't think this was too long of a time, not for Rachel, because he thought, I love her so much, I want to be with her so much. 7 years is nothing. And so he did. He worked for his uncle Laban for 7 years. After 7 years, it was time for the wedding, and Laban agreed. So he veiled his daughter, and instead of taking Rachel to the tent to get it on, he took Leah. He dressed her in veils and cloaks. And so really the marriage had been consummated and done by the time that Jacob realized this was not the sister he wanted to marry. He went to Laban and was like, you tricked me. How could you do this? I worked my 7 years. And he said, look, I don't know how things are done where you are from, but we will not be marrying the younger daughter before we're marrying the older daughter. So hold on for it, y'all. Y'all hear that irony? Because Jacob stole his older brother's birthright. And here Laban is not even knowing about that, but throwing it back in his face. It was karma, y'all. He's like, we don't give to the younger before the older. Oops. Either way, Jacob was like, what do I need to do? Because I love Rachel. I didn't want Leah. I still want Rachel. And he said, I'll tell you what, you work for me for 7 more years and I'll give you Rachel. And so Jacob did. So this is how Laban got 14 years of free labor out of Jacob, y'all. This is wild, right? The Bible is wild. They did get married. Let's go on and talk about Jacob's children. So time passed. Leah was out here in these streets lonely because she was not treated well. She was largely ignored by Jacob. And because of that, the Lord was like, I'm going to give you a blessing. I'm going to open your womb up, honey. I'm going to let you just pop these babies. Leah was happy because the thought was, if I'm bearing him the kids and the children, then he will have to appreciate me. Rachel's womb was closed, so she was barren at this point in time. Jacob was still having marital relations. Like, he was still getting it in with Leah, even though he wasn't attracted to her. He didn't like her as his wife, really. Rachel was always the priority. So she had her first son, which she named Reuben, which literally means a son. Then right after that, she bore another son, and Leah felt like God had heard her prayers and had heard that she was unloved, and he sent her this son. This son's name was Simeon, which means heard. But right after that, she conceived again, and it was another son that she bore, and his name was Levi, which means attached, because Leah thought, surely he will become attached to me because I have bore him 3 sons back to back, but it didn't happen. So then Leah had another son, and his name was Judah, and Judah means praise, because she was praising the Lord for these back-to-back sons, safe births. After Judah, Leah stopped bearing children. Now, I don't know if this was because they weren't sleeping together anymore or she just stopped bearing, but either way, she stopped. But baby, Rachel was mad and jealous and bitter and all the things. So Rachel went to Jacob and was like, give me a son now. Give me some kids now. And Jacob was like, one man, I haven't done anything. I haven't closed your womb. What is it that I'm doing that makes you think you can come to me and tell me to give you children? He's like, how am I withholding them from you? Back at this time, they could blame women easily, but we knew it wasn't him because he was having sons with Leah. Anyway, Rachel said, well, you know what? Here is my maid, Bilhah. She will bear a child on my knees, and that will be my child. So, baby, this is given, if you've ever watched The Handmaid's Tale, where they would hold women down, baby, it was a whole horrible ordeal. It was something similar. I'm not saying it was just like that, but here she is present because she's feeling like being present makes this servant's child her child. Bilhah did conceive a son, and his name was Dan, and it means to be judged, but it was like a delusional thing, and delusion runs heavy in this story. First, you got Jacob's mother, Rebecca, who was like, go away until Esau comes down. Like, he'll come down in a few days. Like, girl, are you stupid? But now you got his favorite wife, Rachel, who is like, I reached for the judgment of the Lord, and he has decided I'm worthy by giving me this son, who is really the servant son, honey. So yeah, you just stole this woman's kid, basically. Because she bore this child, she gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob again, and she did conceive another son. And this son's name was Naphtali, which means wrestling, because she felt like she was wrestling with her sister in a competition. Well, on the other side, Leah was not bearing children anymore. She had 4 sons. Like, this lady has done her job, if you ask me. But she was like, oh, you got your servant pregnant, I can do that too. She turned around and gave her servant to Jacob, Zilpah, and Zilpah bore him a son. And she gave Zilpah to Jacob as a wife. This son was named Gad, and it means fortune comes. Zilpah bore Jacob another son, which is a second son. They named him Asher, and Asher meant happy. So if you lost count, we are at 9 sons for Jacob. The oldest sons were getting older, namely like Reuben and Simeon. So Reuben had went and harvested some mandrakes, and he bought them to his mother Leah. Rachel said, oh, Leah, give me some of your son's mandrakes. Leah said, look, Heifer, ain't it enough that you done took my husband from me? Now you want my son's mandrakes too? But Leah knew that Rachel wanted the mandrakes because they were supposed to help with fertility. So she said, if you give me a night with Jacob, you can have the mandrake, sister. And Leah agreed. And so Jacob got it on with Leah again. And guess what? She got pregnant and had another son. This is her 5th son. His name is Issachar, which means wages, because the barren of the harvest had paid off. And she also felt like Leah gave her maid as Jacob's wife, which gave the servant some respect, whereas Rachel had just had him lay with her maid. And so Leah bore Jacob a 6th son, and that 6th son name was Zebulun, which means dwelling. And afterwards, she bore Jacob his first daughter named Dinah, who has a kind of interesting story on her own, but we'll get into that in another time. Then God remembered Rachel, and he finally opened her womb up, and she gave birth to her first son, whose name was Joseph, and it means he will add. So when Rachel finally had her son, Jacob decided it was time to leave his uncle Laban's land and strike out on his own. And Laban was getting older. He asked Jacob to please stay, help him work the land. And he said, look, give me my wives and my children and let me go. So at this point, Jacob started to separate his flocks from Laban. That leads us to our last section, which is section 5. Part 5 will be called Reunited. Leaving Laban, his uncle, wasn't easy, and Laban actually took some of his men to track Jacob down. And when they came upon him, basically had a long back and forth that I don't want to get into because I want to keep the story moving. They ended up deciding that where Jacob was his land, and before that spot was Laban's land. So they put some rocks down to mark the spot. Now, marking spots with rocks, remember, Bethel had become a thing. Along this trip, there are a couple things to note. Number one, Jacob was extremely nervous because he left his brother on more than bad terms, right? So he was just praying the whole way that God would let Esau greet him nicely, pretty much, that he would not have that animosity in his heart for Jacob anymore. But when they got really close, they kind of went ahead because Joseph sent servants. He had gifts for Esau because he's still trying to ease his way back in. He actually sent 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 20 female donkeys, 10 bulls, 30 milk camels, 200 ewes, and he also had cows and donkeys. It was just so much. He sent the servants ahead with the message and with those things. The servants came right back and said, well, Jacob, Esau already knew you were coming. He's already heading to meet you with 400 men. Well, baby, Jacob got real scared because why is my brother coming with 400 men? If he comes with that many men, he could kill me and all my kids and my wives. On the last leg of the journey, Jacob ended up alone and he was camping at night. He ended up waking up to a man wrestling with him. This man was strong, and eventually the man wanted Jacob to let him go. He's like, the sun is coming up, let me go. And Jacob said, I won't let go until you bless me. The man did. He touched Jacob's hip socket, which knocked his hip out of socket. So Jacob had a limp from that point forward. It was determined that Jacob was wrestling with the angel. He got a new name from this blessing. His name was Israel, which means face of God. Jacob wrestled with an angel, and the angel was like, who are you to wrestle with me? And that's how he got a new name and got a blessing. Now, it was finally time to meet his brother Esau. They were really close to being face to face. Take this in now. Jacob decides to line his wives and children up. He put his servant first with her sons, and then he put the wife that Leah gave him, that used to be her servant, and her sons. Then he put Leah and all of her sons, and then he put Rachel and Joseph last. So the thought would be, if we are attacked and my children and wives are attacked, that Rachel and Joseph would be last and probably hopefully have a chance to get away, if there are any chance of getting away. So just to show you how Jacob thought, this is the man who just wrestled the angel and got blessed. But when Esau saw Jacob, he embraced him wholly and fully. He ran to Jacob, he fell upon him, he hugged him, he kissed his neck. He told Jacob, you can keep all this stuff you saying. What's yours is yours, what's mine is mine. The Lord has blessed me and taken care of me, and I don't need your stuff. Jacob was baffled, but Esau was like, I forgive you, because in the long run, it hasn't mattered. I'm well taken care of, and it's in the past. And Jacob was grateful for that. So all in all, Jacob made it safely to the city that he was going to, and he built another altar there, the God of Israel. The last thing I want to talk about with Jacob is later on, God told Jacob to go back to Bethel. That was the first place he slept, and he put the stone to mark the city and call it that. And he told him, you must journey back there. That's going to be your land. He was obedient. He went back and he took his family. By now, Rachel is pregnant again with her son Benjamin. They were really close to their destination when Rachel went into labor, and it was a hard labor. And so she died during childbirth. Benjamin, her son's name, means son of the right hand. Jacob was more than sad, because Rachel had always been the wife he wanted, always been the favorite, and her sons were favored above all of his other sons and daughter. Jacob actually buried Rachel in what we now would call Bethlehem and marked her grave with a stone. At the same time, there had also been a foretelling that his son Reuben would lay with Bilhah, which was Leah's servant, and he did. Jacob, or Israel now, found out about it, and he was not pleased with Reuben at all. At this time, Jacob had 12 sons. They finally made it to the place where his father Isaac was. That's right, Isaac didn't know how many days he had left, and he really didn't know. Jacob was able to see his father's last breath, and he passed away at 180 years old. And this is where I'm going to end Jacob's story, because the next time we do a Bible story on the channel, we're going to talk about his son Joseph, which is a long story, very interesting, another story of treachery, but I had to stick a pin in some things of importance here to show all sides of his story, and it was important to talk about Jacob's story so that we could get to Joseph. So now we're going to go into the final section, which is my thoughts. In my opinion, this is a loaded story. There are so many lessons here to learn. First, I think that family that is good should be valued, but family doesn't mean that people won't betray you, right? So if that happens, you have to decide when to cut ties. You have to decide if you're going to forgive and when. Jacob and Esau's story, to me, shows like generational curses, because you had Isaac, their father, who really turned a blind eye to familial issues, things that he may have been able to correct, but we can never be sure, because parenting isn't the only factor in how people decide to live and the decisions they make. But in this story, it was a big factor, because you had their mother, who was helping Jacob be treacherous, and their father Isaac, who was just turning a blind eye. That said, Jacob did things that were really bad, and the karma came around quick, right? Because he was duped out of years of his life. Even when we thought that we might be seeing change from him, he really wasn't, because even though he didn't pick Leah as his wife, he still showed so much favoritism. He could not even just give her the courtesy of being kind and being present. And she had all these sons for him. He ended up largely not valuing as much as his son with Rachel, who is Joseph. It was apparent in their placement how he let them be expendable. He didn't have to say it. He put them in the front lines when he thought it was danger, while putting Rachel and her son in the back. Esau shows us what forgiveness looks like. I've always been taught that forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you, because sometimes you may forgive a person who will never change, or you may not forgive them. But either way, it's a reckoning that you have to deal with for yourself. It is never for anybody else. No one can push you to forgiveness. Esau was ready to kill his brother, and then in the end, he was like, hey, my life has been good. He may not have gotten his parents' approval, and this is what I was talking about earlier. Sometimes you have to have people in this place, and you have to kind of know who you are and what you're going to be, because we clearly saw Esau trying to please his parents. His father did favor him, but even he didn't appreciate the wives he took, and we saw him trying to get a third wife. But in the end, Esau kind of lived his life as his own man. There is a section of the Bible that talks about his descendants. Yeah, he was very fruitful and he multiplied and he forgave his brother. Ultimately, there are no perfect parents, but I think that we have to try to do our best. Isaac came from a father who was ready to sacrifice him, and I don't care. You might be like, oh, the Lord intervened. That is traumatic, because if you think your father was putting you on an actual altar and was going to take you out, you're going to have trauma from that. And I think that's how he pulled that into his parenting. And next time when we do the next Bible story, we're going to talk about Joseph, and you already see the fruits that Jacob has put into his sons to have this kind of treachery, right? Even once he changed and his name was changed, there was still heavy favoritism. As a parent, I always tell my kids, I'm going to love you equally. Equally doesn't mean the exact same, because my kids need different things from me, but it's important that I do not show favoritism, and I don't have any. I love them both. I love them so much that I would give anything for them. I do think it's a fascinating story, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. Anything and everything that you think you've seen, it's in the Bible too. Like, you think this is something new that you see in present day? No, it's in the Bible. How the wives were given their servants as the next childbearer / wives. I mean, it's just wild. But I really hope that you enjoyed this story of Jacob and Esau when twins go wrong. And until next time, keep learning, be happy, and always have a blessed day. Bye bye.